Today, we're going to unpack one of the most incredible and honestly unsung stories of World War II engineering. It's all about how a single tiny piece of metal, invented by a truly brilliant woman, completely changed the game in the skies over Europe. This is the story of Miss Schilling's orifice.
Okay, so I want you to imagine something. It's March 1941. You're an RAF pilot in your Hurricane. You spot a German fighter, and you do what you're trained to do. You push the stick forward to dive and get on his tail. But instead of your plane roaring to life, silence. Your engine sputters and dies. This was a terrifying, all too common reality for British pilots. The pattern was always the same, and it was getting them killed.
So, what was going on here? Well, the issue wasn't a lack of courage, and it wasn't a lack of skill. It was a fundamental, deadly flaw built right into their aircraft's engines. A problem of some really simple physics that had absolutely brutal consequences in the middle of a dogfight. 1.5 seconds. That's it. That's all the time it took for an engine to cut out. And when you're hurtling through the sky at 300 miles per hour, 1.5 seconds is an absolute eternity. It was more than enough time for a German Messerschmitt to swoop in, line up its sights, and just open fire on a helpless, stalled British plane.
Now, the heart of the problem was a major difference in engine design. You see, the legendary British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine used a carburetor with a float chamber, kind of like an old lawnmower, if you can believe it. The German Daimler-Benz engine, on the other hand, used a much more advanced direct fuel injection system. This meant German pilots could dive, roll, do whatever they wanted, and their engines would never skip a beat. And trust me, they knew about this British weakness, and they exploited it ruthlessly.
And the why of it all comes down to basic physics. When a British pilot pushed his plane into a steep dive, he'd experienced something called negative G-force. Inside the engine, this literally threw all the fuel up to the top of that little float chamber, away from the intake. So the engine would first flood with too much fuel, and then it would starve. And then it would die.
So with pilots dying every single day, the RAF needed a solution, and they needed it yesterday. A proper, redesigned engine was years away. The answer, as it turned out, didn't come from some big government committee. It came from a truly unlikely hero with a very unique kind of intuition.
Her name was Beatric Schilling, though her friends and colleagues knew her as Tilly. Her official title was Principal Technical Officer for Carburetor Research and Development at the Royal Aircraft Establishment. To put it simply, if anyone on Earth could solve this carburetor problem, it was her. But here's the thing. Tilly wasn't just some brilliant engineer stuck behind a desk. Oh no. She was one of only 2 women in her entire department. She grew up with grease under her fingernails, tearing down and rebuilding motorcycle engines for fun. She was a champion motorcycle racer, hitting insane speeds of 106 miles an hour and earning the prestigious Gold Star Award for it. She didn't just understand engines from a textbook, she understood how they behaved and how they failed under extreme stress because she lived it. And it was this amazing blend of high-level theory and boots-on-the-ground practical intuition that led her to a solution of, well, stunning simplicity. An idea based on one single core principle: just restrict the flow. Her logic was just so straightforward. The carburetor was flooding because way too much fuel could surge up all at once during a dive. So her thinking was, what if you just didn't let it? What if you installed a simple little device to limit the maximum amount of fuel that could flow at any given time? Just enough to keep the engine purring, but not so much that it would flood and stall. Now, the idea was simple, sure, but the execution, that required absolute precision. After a ton of testing, 17 different sizes to be exact, Schilling found the perfect dimension for her little brass washer. It needed a hole just 0.04 of an inch in diameter. You get that? If it was too big, the engine would still flood. Too small, and it would starve for fuel at full power. It had to be absolutely perfect.
But, having the solution and actually getting it into a combat plane were two very, very different things. Going through the official channels would take months, maybe even years, and Tilly knew pilots didn't have that kind of time. So she decided to take a huge, career-ending gamble. Let's be crystal clear about the risk she was taking here. What she was about to do violated dozens, over 40 RAF regulations. If her little modification failed and a pilot died because of it, she would face a court-martial. She was putting her entire career, her reputation, and even her freedom on the line.
So on the morning of March 14th, with the help of a sergeant who was in on it,
She secretly had one of her brass restrictors installed in Squadron Leader Davies' Hurricane, without him even knowing. He took off at 8:30, and then came the agonizing wait. An entire hour of complete radio silence. Can you imagine how she felt, standing there on the tarmac? Every minute must have felt like a lifetime. Finally, at 9:37, the radio crackled to life. 3 planes were coming home.
When Squadron Leader Davies landed, he wasn't exhausted or shaken like pilots usually were. He was buzzing, he was excited. And when they asked him about the engine, his response was immediate. Best the Merlin's ever run. He said he dived on 2 Messerschmitts, the exact maneuver that should have stalled his engine, and it never missed a single beat. It worked. It actually worked. That one successful unauthorized test was the spark that lit the fire. It didn't just fix a single plane. It was the beginning of a shift that would turn the tide of the entire air war. This little piece of brass was about to become a genuine war-winning modification. And the impact was immediate and frankly staggering. Just look at these numbers. In March, before the fix, RAF fighters reported engine failures in 38% of diving attacks. That's more than 1 in 3. A month later, after Tilley's restrictors started getting installed across the fleet, that number plummeted to almost 0.4%. The problem was gone. And that technical fix translated directly into victory in the skies. In March, the RAF's kill-to-loss ratio was a pretty grim 1.3 to 1. They were barely breaking even. By April, just 1 month later, it had skyrocketed to 3.2 to 1. British pilots could finally attack with confidence. That huge tactical advantage the Germans had, it vanished almost overnight. The pilots, in that special brand of crude but affectionate military humor, they gave the life-saving device a nickname that stuck: Miss Schilling's orifice. Apparently, Tilley herself didn't mind one bit. She figured if the cheeky nickname helped them remember to install the vital part, then it was serving its purpose. So, what is the real legacy of this simple little brass washer? How should this elegant, life-saving solution be remembered today? Well, you don't have to take my word for it. The people who were there, they were unambiguous. Chief Engineer Keith Maddock put it as plainly as you can. Beatrice Schilling helped us win World War II. Of that, there is no doubt. Her tiny invention wasn't just a small improvement. It was considered a genuine war-winning modification.
It really leaves you with a fascinating question to chew on, doesn't it? We so often focus on the big battles, the generals, the grand strategies, but how many other pivotal moments in history were actually turned by the quiet brilliance of an unsung hero, someone who just came up with a simple, elegant solution to a really complex problem?
And that makes me curious to hear from you. What's a forgotten story from history, maybe a person or an invention that you think more people should know about? Let us know down in the comments below. I genuinely love to read them. And of course, if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe for more stories from the battlefield. Thanks for watching.